Welcome to this week's webinar, where we will be discussing Zero Trust Extended Framework and how to establish it with Cisco solutions. So, first of all, a little bit about me. My name is Stojan. I'm with NIL since 2004. So I basically have an ID badge tattooed to my forehead. While working at NIL, I've achieved the CCIE and CCSI certifications in security. So I've been teaching various courses and doing projects all around the world. So while at NIL and also previously, I've been focusing on security, mainly on Cisco, but also other vendors such as RSA, VMware, Microsoft, IBM, and so forth. I do very much like open source solutions, such as Linux, Snort, Ansible, etc. So if possible, I do use the command line to do whatever we can, but then obviously sometimes you need to use the GUI. Currently, I'm working mostly on architecture, best practices, and mentorship. And while I'm an engineer at heart, I do love being an instructor, and currently I work as an IT architect. So while I'm not working at NIL, I love photography. I dive from time to time and love to travel around the world. So who are we and why are you attending this webinar? So NIL is an advanced IT solutions, services, consulting and training provider. We've been around for 30 plus years and we are located in Slovenia. However, we do have offices around the world and we are from Canada, Morocco, Serbia, South Africa, UAE, USA, and so forth. We've been founded in 1989 and we've been a Cisco Gold partner since 1992. Again, dealing with anything from course development, course delivery, advanced services projects, both Slovenia and abroad. And currently are part of the Consta group. So we've joined mid last year and have been enjoying it so far. So what are we going to talk about today? We will be talking about what Zero Trust is, what isn't, and how we can deploy it. We will be discussing Cisco's approach to Zero Trust architecture. So which tools, which mechanisms, which elements of Cisco security portfolio we can use to achieve Zero Trust deployment. And then we'll focus on the three main pillars. So we'll take a look at Zero Trust for workforce, for workloads, and for the workplace. So let's kick it off. Any questions that you have, please use the Q&A panel and we'll review the questions when we're done. So why do we actually need Zero Trust? So Zero Trust is a mechanism that helps us secure our modern work environments, our environments where the perimeter is long gone and where by trusting too much, we can actually allow the attackers, bad guys, penetrate our defenses, to exfiltrate the data, and obviously to cause harm. So when can this happen? Well, we can, for example, open a funny video on WhatsApp. We can click a suspicious link. We can basically browse to a certain website and something weird pops up. So in any case, attackers nowadays, when they attack us, when they try to breach our environment, when they try to invade our companies, they would first start with reconnaissance, meaning that they would maybe stalk us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Google+, on Twitter, and so forth. And based on the information that they gain, they would try to make us basically do a stupid thing. So click a phishing link, download a funny attachment, look at some videos, something like that. So what happens when we do this? Well, if our device that we're using is vulnerable, in that case, basically the perimeter, which we'll talk about later on, is pretty much gone. But again, whatever perimeter we still have can be exploited, can be bypassed by using the malware that was deployed for us. Well, when an attacker actually has a foothold in our environment, they can start to spread around. They can use lateral movement, jumping from box to box, to gain credentials, to learn about our infrastructure, to learn about our users that can be seen in our environment. And obviously the goal is to gain elevated privileges, such as admin or SU or SA, whichever, and to gather the data. And once the data is gathered, once they've successfully penetrated our inner defenses, they can then exfiltrate the data using those admin privileges and obviously monetize it in the best way possible. So in order for us to keep our environment secure, however dispersed, however the parameters are, however federated they are around the world, we need a way to deal with this. And here comes Zero Trust. which again is not a new concept. Zero trust has been around since early 2000s, and basically it started when our environments, our workforce, our companies actually started spreading around. So we had people working out of meetings, out of airports, out of other offices and so forth. The perimeter that we once knew no longer existed. The data, the applications, the users, the devices roamed around the internet and still are, obviously. And we needed a way on how to cope with this. We needed a way how to handle this from both productivity and security perspectives and to make this still secure. So at that point, we started talking about the need for trust. How do we trust the user? How do we trust the network connection? How do we trust a data stream if we don't know what it is? So in mid-2000s, multiple models emerged. So Forrester coined a zero trust concept, which was mostly based on next generation firewalls and DMZs and so forth. Google created a concept called Beyond Corp, which is a theoretical concept of how we set up the zero trust environment. And then Forrester actually expanded this to zero trust extended with multiple pillars, multiple elements that are relevant to architecture. Nowadays, zero trust is on the menu of every security and network vendor. So everyone has their own implementation, own version, or own concept of what zero trust should be. And basically, because it's so widespread, we do really need to address what it actually is, how we approach it, and what are the main concepts. So the basic tenet of zero trust, of what are we actually trying to achieve, is least privileged access. Meaning that wherever we are, whichever user is connecting data stream using whichever application on whichever device, they need to be given just enough privilege for them to be able to do their job. However, not too much so that they cannot exploit the environment and that they can still basically perform the action that they were supposed to do. So as I mentioned previously, we need to establish a context. We need to understand what type of devices are connecting to our environment by using some compliance elements, by employing BYOD, by understanding what type of device is connecting. We need to obviously establish the user identity. We need to establish the context of which user is connecting, from where, using what type of device, at what time, and so forth. We need to understand what type of data are we trying to reach. Is this a corporate data? Is this something internal? Is this something that can be viewed externally and so forth? Again, we need to understand if the data that we're accessing is clean, has been deemed safe and so forth. And obviously, we need to understand the type of the connectivity. So has the connection been established via a secure link? Is it done via clear text? Is it done via encrypted link? So whenever we understand the full context of the connection, so the device, the user, data stream, and connection type, that's when we can actually establish a chain of trust. That's when we can actually say, okay, I don't specifically trust any device, any user data. I have zero trust towards those. But once I build the context, once I understand everything that needs to be established within our connectivity context, this is where I can actually set up restricted access and allow connectivity to my internal resources. So how does Cisco approach the zero trust architecture and all the things connected to it? When building an architecture, we need to have some pillars. We need to have something to build our network upon, to build our policies upon, to actually create an environment where we can trust the connectivity, the users, the data, and so forth. So in order for us to actually build this upon secure pillars, we need to understand them. And the pillars that we'll be talking about today are the workforce. So our employees, our internal applications, our processes that they basically work within our environment. We have our workloads, so our VMs, our containers, our clusters, etc., which run within our or hybrid or external data centers. And we have our workplace, so an office, a table, remote office, etc., where our users connect, which still needs to be managed, which needs to be controlled, and which needs to be configured. And those are the three main pillars of the zero trust architecture we'll be discussing today. So the workforce, the workloads, and the workplace itself. So how does zero trust work? And what are the main steps that we need to take in order to achieve the zero trust connectivity? So it's a cyclical process. So as with anything else with security, it's not something that we set up once and forget about it. It's not something that we would configure, buy, rent, label, etc. But it's a process. It's a mindset of how we actually build zero trust environment within our organization, and then stick with it, and then stick with all the processes, all the elements that we have. So first of all, we need to establish trust. As I said, we need to build that chain of trust that will bind all the elements together. So we need to identify the users of the applications. We need to understand which devices are connected and what is the posture, what is the status of those devices that connect to our environment and collect our data. We need to understand from which location this user or this application is connecting, and other relevant attributes to build the context. So once we understand the context, once we understand who from where using what is accessing what data at what time, we can then enforce the least privilege access to either networks, applications, resources, users, things, regardless. So to whatever it is ours to protect, to whatever is internal, that's what we're protecting. And a very critical part, we continue monitoring the environment, continue monitoring the context, we continue monitoring devices, users, apps, and so forth, so that we understand if any of the links inside the chain is broken, so that then the whole chain breaks. If the traffic that we're seeing is not threat traffic, if the behavior that we're seeing, so for example, the identity of the user changes, the device type changes, the data flow characteristics change, and so forth, if anything of those things within the chain, within the context is broken, then basically the trust needs to be revoked, access needs to be blocked, and we need to start with re-authentication. We need to start with re-establishing that chain of trust. So that we can leverage to achieve the zero trust architecture. So first of all, we have our workforce. So for the workforce, as I said, these are our employees or our partners, our external entities that connect to the data that we are governing. So for them, we need to authenticate them. We need to understand the identity, and then we need to understand the devices that they use to actually connect to the protected resources. And we can use Duo to actually achieve that, to achieve multi-factor authentication, to achieve device integrity, to achieve the compliance that we need in order for us to understand the first pillar, so which is the workforce. The second pillar are the workloads. So the workloads, again, being our data center VMs, our Kubernetes clusters, our clientless connectivity, etc. Basically the resources which we're trying to protect, again, which can run either on-premise, within hybrid environments, within public clouds, etc. Basically, those are the workloads that we're trying to understand and protect. So we'll talk about understanding and visibility a bit later on. And we have our workplace. So the workplace, which is our office, which is our central location, remote branches, etc., where again, we need to establish the least privileged access control. Again, allow the users, the devices, the subnets to connect to other elements of the network in the way that is allowed, but does not exceed the requirements that those users and those processes, those elements actually have. And we need to find a way to actually deploy this in an orchestrated, managed way, as we'll see a bit later on. But obviously, those are not the only elements within the Cisco security portfolio that we can leverage to achieve the zero trust architecture. We can obviously use other advanced security mechanisms such as Umbrella to provide DNS and web security. We can use AMP on the endpoints, on the web, email clusters, on the firewalls, etc., to provide advanced malware protection. We can leverage Meraki for medium and small businesses, again, to provide connectivity and visibility. AnyConnect as the de facto endpoint client, SD-WAN for secure and robust WAN connectivity, email, web security to provide visibility into, obviously ACI for data center deployment, visibility, connectivity, and so forth. And in order for us to achieve full visibility, in order for us to understand what's happening within either on-premise, hybrid, or public environments, we need to have full visibility using StealthWatch Enterprise or StealthWatch Cloud, or to bring it all together to provide incident or orchestration, we can use Cisco Threat Response to really bind the whole thing together. So let's start looking at the main pillars and how we implement them. What are the main topics that we can actually cover there? So we mentioned workforce. With the workforce, as I mentioned before, these are our users, our partners, our external entities that need to be authenticated, that we need to understand who they are and what are they using to access our environments. At that point, we're using Duo to provide the multi-factor authentication, using either the mobile devices such as phones and tablets, or using the PCs or macOS or whichever device we're having to actually ensure the trustworthiness of the devices and users, to assess the posture, the status of the devices that are actually connecting the network, and obviously to enforce the risk-based policies. So again, understand the context in which the client is connecting to our network. And based on that context, we then apply per application policies. And obviously, again, if context changes, we have the ability to break the connection, to disallow access, and so on. So when leveraging Duo to establish security, to secure applications running in the cloud, we can use a component called Duo Access Gateway, which can reside within a DMZ of our environment and which can act as an interface, like as a portal, sitting between the public cloud instances, such as Salesforce, Google Apps, Amazon, Slack, Dropbox, and so forth. And those applications can actually be configured to connect to our Access Gateway, to enforce Duo-based authentication using multi-factor auth, using contextual information, using device information, and so on, and obviously integrate this with our internal identity directory, be it LDAP, be it AD, and so forth. And this way, we can achieve that as the users use our resources within the public or hybrid clouds, they still authenticate using secure methods the same way as they would when setting up a VPN, connected to the local network, and so forth. So what kind of problems, what kind of issues are we resolving using these methods? So first of all, obviously stolen credentials or compromised credentials and so on. So if a certain person's laptop has been compromised, if someone has collected their passwords, or God forbid they broke into a database, collected multiple passwords and so on, well, the multi-factor authentication can actually help us here. The users can be challenged either on their phone, on their tablet, on their PC to provide additional credentials, provide additional proofs that it's actually those users, and then this way we can verify if this is actually the user or not. We can provide simple and strong elements and resources regardless of where they are, again by using the endpoint health visibility, by using the group-based policies, single sign-on, and so forth, and to protect the users from threats when they're remote. So again, as I said, Duo, Tetration, and SDA were not the only element, but we can obviously leverage AnyConnect, we can leverage AMP and our other elements to secure our roaming users around the world. And basically when our users roam abroad, when they basically connect from the outside world to our internal network, to our internal resources, to our web-based gateways, to our RDP sessions, so on, we can leverage another tool which is called the Duo Network Gateway, or DNG, which again can act as a proxy, which understands our Duo integration, which can leverage full Duo capabilities by inspecting the endpoint, by inspecting the user, by providing the multi-factor auth, and thus providing secure connectivity to our internal resources, to the entrusted users using the trusted devices. Okay, so the second pillar or the second element that we'll be talking about today are the workloads. So the workloads, again, our applications, our containers, our elements within the DC, again, regardless of where they might be running. And the first thing that we need to establish is visibility. We need to understand how those applications are actually behaving. We need to understand what is the normal flow regarding the network visibility, regarding the processes, regarding the files, regarding all the elements that the application actually triggers when it functions, when basically which databases it connects to, at what time it functions, and so on. Again, the visibility and the modeling is the first thing that we can achieve using Cisco Tetration. And using the model, using the behavior that we understand, we can then build the microsegmentation policy, which can then be enforced using standard contracts within ACI by combining the elements on the SDA, using the security group tags and so forth. But by actually leveraging that information within the data center, we can achieve an automated context-based segmentation policy and also obviously visibility. We can again fully understand what's happening on our servers, on our VMs, which processes are being triggered, which data flows are being used, what is the application doing, and again, if there is the discrepancy, if there is a change in the behavior of how certain app, certain container, certain element within our DC is behaving, we can again trigger change, and we can, let's say, disallow this application or the user to be able to access the resources. Again, as I mentioned, understanding how the workloads behave, where they connect, when they connect, what are the resources that they need, when are they using them, and so forth, is the first thing that we can leverage to actually build dynamic policies, and then use those policies within our data center and also combine them within our access network by combining the SGTs, so security group tags, by combining the contracts that we built, and so forth. So what kind of problems does titration help us solve, and what can we hope to achieve within this model? First of all, as I mentioned, is discovery and modeling of the applications and of the behavior. Again, we're not just looking at the network level. By using titration, we can leverage the agents which run within the VMs to help us understand which processes, which elements actually get triggered when a certain app runs. And even if we, let's say, encounter like a Trojan horse or a time bomb, which will trigger an anomalous behavior, certain processes, certain files being accessed, which may not be normally, again, we can use the titration visibility and analysis to alert us about such an occurrence. We can also create and enforce zero trust segmentation policies by using application detection mechanisms, by contextual policies, dynamic attributes, etc., which translate to ACI policies within our data centers. And we need to limit access to our applications, to our workloads, to only the users and devices that require it. And again, here is where we can actually leverage the portfolio, the Cisco security elements allow us, that we can actually use titration together with DNS Center, together with software-defined access, ICE, AnyConnect, etc., to once determine the identity of the users, of the devices, etc., and then use that information wherever we can within our environment. And to continue with the continuous trust verification, again, using the security dashboard that titration provides us, we can achieve the real-time security and workload health visibility. We can defend our workloads from attacks by using the titration forensics to understand the segmentation rules and trust and risk data. And we can leverage other security tools, again, such as threat response, next generation firewalls, StealthWatch, either cloud or the enterprise, to fully secure our workloads, our environments, our data centers, and obviously our other elements of the network. And last but not the least, there's our workplace. So our local networks, our branches, etc., that again, we need to secure. What can we use there? What can we leverage to achieve the zero trust architecture at that point? Well, using the software-defined access, which is the de facto actually set up modern networks in a dynamic and secure way in nowadays, is by using the profiling, using the BYOD lifecycle management, using the device posture, and other elements that can actually be provided to us as the devices, as the users connect to our managed networks. We can then leverage security group tags to filter and administer the security group policies on the access networks that exist within our environments, and to actually provide continuous monitoring and health of our devices, again, by understanding what's happening on the endpoints, by verifying the posture of the devices, by understanding the vulnerability of the different elements within our networks, and to trigger actions based on the indications of compromise that, again, we might see within our environment. And the tool that can actually help us leverage this is the DNA Center. With the SDA fabric creation, anything from VLANs, VXLANs, Lisp, routing, BGP, VRFs, and so on, and to easily and in uniform way set up the basic parameters, basic tenets of endpoint security within our internal networks, anything from .1x configuration and authentication, ICE policies, security group tag, base trust sec, switch sensors, profiling, AA administration, and so forth. So leveraging the power of the DNA Center and the segmentation easily achieve using those tools, we can then basically break up our environments into virtual networks where, using security group tags, we can provide internal filtering between the users of the same or different types. We can leverage .1x for endpoint, user, IoT device, etc. authentication, and then obviously feed this data into titration and leverage mechanisms such as pxGrid to disseminate the information across other Cisco and third-party security solutions that can use it, analyze it, provide additional visibility, and so forth. So how does SDA using the DNA Center help us deploy this within our workplace. First of all, it gives us full visibility about who, when, how connected to our managed network by using SDA, ICE, DNAC, A profiling, and so forth. We establish the trust using the mechanisms and tools such as threat-centric NAC and MDM for posture, so that we fully understand at all times who using what is connecting to our network, at what point, using which mechanism, and so forth. And to easily apply group-based policies and leverage the network analytics and group-based policies, again, on the endpoints, on the access network, and in hybrid environments, again, cloud, and so forth. So, to summarize, we can leverage Duo to secure our workforce, our endpoints, and our users. We can use Tetration for our workload security, understanding the contextual information about the processes, applications, VMs that actually run within on-premise and hybrid data centers, and use the SDA access within the workplace to establish the least privilege access control for any types of devices connecting to our environments, and obviously providing additional security. So thank you very much. And obviously, if you have any additional questions, we're here to actually answer them. So there was a first question before coming in from El Sayed, asking if logging all sessions is part of the Zero Trust. So we obviously need to understand the context of the sessions and of the connectivity that actually happens within our environments. So while we may not need to log everything, because obviously if our users connect on the cloud to, let's say, public cloud-based resources, if they connect to external networks on, we cannot see those logs. But it is important for us to actually understand and collect all the contextual information that we can and analyze it. Using anything from Duo logs to the firewall information, to our switch and DNS center-based information within our local environments. And thus, we can actually understand the full picture and trigger upon any context change. I hope that answered that the first question. Are there any other questions? So let me just scroll within the Q&A button. Okay, so that was the first one. So verbally. There was another question regarding the PowerPoint. Yes, the presentation and the recording will be available on the NIL website to all the participants of the session and to anyone who has registered. Okay, you're welcome, Hazem. So do we have any other questions? Okay, so there's a question here coming in from Peter regarding what are the biggest challenges when actually encountering the Zero Trust implementation. So one of the biggest challenges that we are seeing at NIL is actually understanding the mindset, understanding on what changed in order for us to implement the Zero Trust architecture, to understand that in modern environments, any connection, anything that we see within our networks, within our clouds, within anything that we're protecting, must be considered unsafe, unsecure, hostile, until we verify the context, until we verify the users, applications, and the types of connectivity, and only upon understanding the context, and only upon basically deploying the mechanisms that help us also leverage the security tools, we actually understand that we have achieved Zero Trust-based environment. Obviously, it's a journey. It's not something that we can purchase. It's not something that we can deploy overnight. It's not something that we can just easily say, okay, this is Zero Trust and we're done. But it is important to understand that we need to understand our processes, our users, our data, our applications in order for us to actually achieve the required security. Okay, so there is a question from Ali Faras. So is Zero Trust license-based? So it's important to understand that there is no one single Zero Trust product that we can purchase. So we've talked about different products today, from Duo to Tetration to SDA, DNS Center, and so forth. So each of those products have their own license, have their own licensing model, and so forth. I do understand that if you choose to deploy multiple security products or multiple elements within your environment, you should consider the bundles which Cisco provides for larger enterprises where multiple products and elements actually come already together. But again, it's important to understand that you cannot buy a zero trust box. You cannot buy a zero trust application and say, okay, I've been certified zero trust and this is it. You do need to understand you need to instill the mentality of how zero trust actually works, and only then can you actually hope to actually achieve that. Okay. There's another question coming in. So how much of zero trust implementation is technical versus cultural, which is something that I may have just touched upon. So in this seminar, we mostly talked about the technical perspective. So we talked about what technical elements must we put in place in order for us to understand what our users, applications, networks are doing, how they're behaving, what is the anomaly-based behavior within our environments. However, as I mentioned before, instilling the mindset and understanding what needs to be changed, how our users need to behave, how our applications need to be written, how our security policies need to behave, is also an integral part of deploying a zero trust solution. So if we do not understand the mentality, any tool that we deploy won't actually solve any problem. But we need to basically understand the building blocks, both from the policy and from the technical perspective, and then basically build a solution that will hold together. Okay, so there was a question from Johannes. So regarding ACI-based implementation of zero trust. So within ACI, again, ACI is a solution that we use to build modern data centers, to actually create single-site, multi-site, multi-pod, etc. deployments regarding our workflows and workloads that we run within the data centers. Regarding ACI, as I mentioned before, this actually touches upon the workloads part that we talked about. So within the data centers, we would be deploying a solution like Tetration, which would actually help us understand what our applications are doing, how our users actually access those applications, what happens on the servers where certain apps run, which processes, which files, which registry keys are being accessed. And then based on that, we can actually understand the behavior of those apps and then integrate the Tetration elements together with ACI, with the contracts that we built within the ACI itself to filter or to allow or disallow access between different workloads to actually achieve the zero trust mechanisms. I hope that that answers the question. Okay, so there's another question regarding zero trust. So should zero trust be security or productivity driven initiative? So security versus productivity is like a never ending story. So if I lock something down too much, is anything going to work? Or basically, if we come from the other side, if I want to be productive, if I want to actually have sufficient access, if I want to reach appropriate audiences, do I really need all the security? Well, when talking about zero trust, again, this is where these two elements actually come together. If we want to achieve proper productivity, if we want to have a productive environment where we can feel secure when actually collaborating with our partners, within our coworkers, if we want to have a long-term environment in which we can create our work, which we know is not accessed by third parties, which we know is not cannot be, let's say, compromised, and we know basically the environment is secure and so forth, we do need to leverage both security and productivity in order for us to achieve like the golden standard. So the zero trust can actually help us understand which rules and which mechanisms should be applied within an environment to achieve the optimum security. Again, it's not a story that we can like set up and finish. It's not like anything within security that we just configure and forget about it. Any firewall, any CM, any endpoint security element and so forth needs to be monitored, needs to be tuned. And with productivity, it's a similar thing. So obviously for us to be able to collaborate in the best way, in order for us to be able to share the ideas, to rely upon certain communications, to be able to store the data, etc., we need to be able to provide a robust way to actually build this. And by leveraging the elements that we talked about today, so security of the data using Tetration, security of the user connectivity using Duo, and security of the workplace using the SDA, this is how we can actually achieve both. So to provide maximum productivity, which is still secure, which can still be trusted upon, and which will basically allow us to continue to be productive for a long time without any security breaches that might actually happen in the middle. Do we have any other questions? Let me see. Okay, yeah, there's another one coming from Matjaž. So basically, Matjaž is actually asking, is zero trust equal to conditional access? So that's a quite interesting question as well. Well, as you mentioned, providing access to the networks, providing access to the resources, to the application, etc., is based on certain conditions. So it is based on the condition that the user is authenticated. It is based on the condition that the device is known, that it's registered, that it's, let's say, clean, and so forth. It is based on the conditions that we trust the connection coming in from a certain device at a certain time, and so forth. So we would say that conditional access, while it is an integral part of zero trust, it's not the only part. Again, as you mentioned, we need to also understand what's happening within our workloads and our applications, that we understand, again, how our apps work, what they need to do to basically provide full functionality, which are the things that trigger where application actually fully functions. And basically, those are also the elements which actually comprise the zero trust architecture, but obviously conditional access is a large part of what we're talking here. Okay, so thank you very much to anyone who attended this session live. As I mentioned, the recording will soon be available on NIL's website and will be shared with our partners and also within the Construct group. So thank you very much for attending the seminar. And if you have any other questions, feel free to contact me at srančić@nil.com, and have a nice day.